On my sister's wedding day, I was supposed to sit with my family. Instead, my mother dragged me out of my dress, shoved a server's uniform into my hands, and hissed, "The groom's family is high society. Don't embarrass us." So I carried trays. I cleared plates. I smiled like the obedient daughter they had trained me to be. Then I reached the groom's table with a glass of wine. His hand trembled. The glass slipped. Red wine splashed across my sleeve, and every conversation in the ballroom died. He looked straight at me, pale as a ghost, and said one word that destroyed my family's perfect wedding. "Boss." What my parents didn't know was that the woman they dressed as a maid owned the company their new son-in-law had been trying to impress for months. And before the night was over, my sister's wedding would become the funeral of every lie this family had ever told. To understand why I still went to that wedding, you need to know this. My family had been preparing me for that server's uniform long before my mother ever handed it to me. My name is Evelyn Harper. I was 38 years old, living alone in Manhattan in a small apartment that felt more like home than any house I had grown up in. It was quiet, organized, and entirely mine. The narrow table by the window, the coffee mug beside my laptop, the framed city photograph above my desk. None of it came from my parents. I had built that life myself, and because of that, every inch of it felt like proof that I had survived them. People who knew me in the city saw a calm woman, controlled, polite, hard to shake. They did not know that I had learned that stillness in a house where reacting only gave my family another reason to call me difficult. Silence had been my shield for so long that most people mistook it for weakness. The wedding invitation arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked between bills and business mail. The envelope was thick cream paper, with my mother's handwriting across the front. I recognized the tight, elegant letters immediately. Margaret Harper had always written like every word was an instruction. I stood at my kitchen counter and held the envelope for several seconds before opening it. My younger sister, Linda, was getting married to Daniel Cole at a luxury hotel in the Hamptons. Gold lettering, embossed borders, oceanfront ceremony, grand ballroom reception. Everything about it screamed money, image, and status. That was Linda's world, or at least the world she wanted everyone to believe she belonged to. I scanned the invitation carefully. There was no personal note from Linda, no request for me to stand beside her, no mention of a family table. Behind the formal card was a smaller note in my mother's handwriting. "Evelyn, arrive early. We'll need extra help before the ceremony." I read it once, then again. There was no please, no warmth, no sign that I was being invited as the bride's older sister. I was being summoned because there would be work to do, and in my family, work had always been my place. I set the note on the counter and felt the old ache return. It did not shock me. That almost made it worse. Some insults hurt less like a slap and more like a familiar hand pressing on an old bruise. Linda had always been the golden child. When we were little, she got the new dresses, the bigger birthday parties, the louder applause. My mother praised her smile as if it were a gift to the world. My father laughed at her mistakes and called them charm. If Linda wanted attention, the whole house rearranged itself around her. I learned a different role. I carried groceries. I washed dishes. I gave up things because Linda needed them more. When relatives visited, my mother introduced Linda with pride, then mentioned me only if someone asked. My father liked to say, "Evelyn is helpful," as if that single word was enough to define an entire daughter. Helpful meant useful. Useful meant invisible until needed. Invisible meant easy to blame, easy to forget, and easy to command. By adulthood, nothing had really changed. Linda went into public relations and built her life around image. She posted photos from rooftop events, fashion parties, and private dinners beside people with polished smiles and expensive watches. My parents loved every bit of it. They spoke about her as if her success belonged to the whole family. They never asked much about my work. That was partly my fault. Years earlier, I had stopped trying to explain myself to people determined not to listen. When my mother asked if I was still doing events, I said yes and left it there. When my father joked that at least I had always been good at arranging things, I smiled and let him believe he had insulted me. They did not know the size of the events I handled. They did not know the clients who waited for my approval. They did not know that Grand Muse Events, the company I had built from nothing, now planned the kind of luxury nights their social circle dreamed of attending. I let them stay ignorant. There was safety in being underestimated. There was also information. People reveal more when they think you have no power. Still, that note stayed on my counter for 3 days. Each morning, I saw it beside my coffee. Each night, I saw it when I came home from work. I told myself to throw it away. I owed them nothing. I had employees depending on me, clients who respected my time, and a life that did not require the Harper family's permission. But the note bothered me because of what it assumed. Arrive early. We'll need extra help. They still believed I would come the moment they called. They still believed I would fold myself small enough to fit whatever role they handed me. And maybe in some painful corner of my heart, I wanted to know if that was still true. So I decided to go. Not because I forgave them, not because I believed Linda wanted me there, not because I hoped my parents would finally look at me and feel regret. I went because I was tired of being haunted by rooms I had escaped. I wanted to stand in front of them as the woman I had become, even if they were too blind to recognize her. The night before the wedding, I chose a simple blue dress from my closet. It was elegant, modest, and quiet, the kind of dress that did not demand attention, but did not apologize for existing. I packed it carefully, then placed the invitation on top of my bag. For once, I was not going there to be useful. I was going there to witness the truth. The Hamptons looked almost too perfect that morning. The sky was pale blue, the ocean wind was clean, and the hotel rose above the coastline like it had been built for people who never had to ask the price of anything. White flowers lined the entrance in tall glass vases. Valets moved between luxury cars. Staff crossed the marble lobby carrying boxes of champagne, folded linens, and arrangements of roses so large they looked impossible to hold. I arrived early, just as my mother had ordered, wearing the blue dress I had chosen the night before. It was simple, modest, and appropriate for a wedding. I had not worn it to compete with Linda. I had worn it because I wanted to walk into that hotel as myself, not as the version of me my family had spent years trying to shrink. For a few seconds, standing in the lobby with my garment bag over one arm, I let myself believe the day might pass quietly. Maybe I would help with a few small things. Take my seat near the back, watch Linda marry Daniel Cole, and leave before anyone had the chance to cut too deeply. That hope lasted until I saw my mother waiting near the staircase. Margaret Harper was dressed in silver silk, her pearls resting perfectly against her throat. She looked polished, expensive, and already irritated. Her eyes moved over me from head to toe, stopping on my dress with a look that made the old child inside me want to check what I had done wrong. "That won't do," she said. I held my breath for a moment, then answered carefully. "Good morning, Mother." She ignored the greeting. "You can't wear that." "It's a wedding dress code," I said. "It's appropriate. For a guest, maybe." Her voice sharpened on the word guest, making it clear she did not consider me one. She reached for a garment bag draped over a chair beside her and pushed it into my hands. "Change into this." I unzipped the bag just enough to see black fabric, a white shirt, and an apron folded with hotel precision. For a moment, I did not understand what I was looking at. Or maybe I understood too well and my mind refused to accept it. "A uniform?" I asked. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice as a group of guests entered the lobby behind us. "The groom's family is high society, so don't embarrass us. There are executives, investors, and people with real influence here today. Linda's wedding has to be flawless." I looked at her, waiting for the part where she remembered I was her daughter. It never came. "You'll help the service staff," she continued. "Carry trays, clear plates, make sure the tables stay neat, and for heaven's sake, smile. No one wants to see that wounded look on your face." The words were delivered with such practical calm that they hurt more than shouting would have. She was not losing control. She was arranging me, the way she had arranged the flowers, the seating chart, and the photographs. In her mind, I was another detail that had to be managed before I ruined the image she wanted. "I'm Linda's sister," I said quietly. My mother's expression hardened. "Today, your sister is marrying into a family that matters. You can either help us make a good impression, or you can leave and prove exactly why I was right, not to seat you with the guests." There it was, the trap hidden inside the insult. If I refused, I was selfish. If I stayed, I disappeared. I wanted to walk out. I imagined handing the uniform back to her, stepping through the lobby doors, and letting the ocean air carry me away from all of it. But then I saw my father across the room, speaking with two older men in tailored suits. He glanced at me, saw the garment bag in my hands, and looked away without surprise. Not concern, not anger, not even embarrassment, just approval, quiet and cowardly. That hurt more than my mother's words. I took the uniform upstairs, to a small changing room at the end of a service hallway. The space smelled faintly of starch and cleaning solution. There was a mirror, a chair, and a hook on the wall. I hung my blue dress there before changing, then folded it carefully over the back of the chair. I did it slowly, smoothing the fabric with both hands, because even if my family wanted to strip me of dignity, I would not help them do it. The uniform fit badly. The shirt was stiff at the collar, the vest pulled at my shoulders, and the apron tied around my waist like a sign announcing what my family believed I was. When I looked in the mirror, I saw exactly what my mother wanted the guests to see. Not the bride's older sister, not a woman with a life of her own, just another silent figure meant to move through the room without being noticed. I let the humiliation burn for one full breath. Then I straightened my shoulders and opened the door. By the time I returned downstairs, the hotel had transformed from preparation into performance. Guests filled the lobby and drifted toward the ballroom, glittering in designer dresses and dark suits. My mother spotted me immediately and gave a small, satisfied nod, as if I had finally become presentable. "Good," she said. "The catering manager is expecting you." She did not thank me. She did not apologize. She simply pointed me toward the staff entrance. For the next hour, I worked beside people who were at least being paid to serve. I carried trays of champagne through the ballroom. I adjusted place cards. I collected empty glasses from side tables. When one of the florists spilled water near the aisle, my mother snapped her fingers and told me to clean it before someone important walked through. I knelt on the marble floor with a towel in my hand, while my sister stood 20 feet away in her bridal robe, laughing as a photographer adjusted the veil around her shoulders. Linda saw me. I know she did. Our eyes met for one brief second. Her smile did not fade. She simply looked past me, the way someone looks past a maid who has entered the frame by mistake. A cousin I had not seen in years recognized me near the champagne table. Her eyes widened, then dropped to my apron. "Evelyn," she asked uncertainly, "are you working here now?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared beside her with a bright smile. "Evelyn is helping us today. She has always been good at that." The cousin gave me a look of pity so soft, it almost felt like another insult. I picked up my tray and moved on. The whispers followed me after that. I heard my name in pieces as I passed between tables. Isn't that the bride's sister? Why is she dressed like staff? Maybe something happened to her. One woman near the bar murmured, "Poor thing," as if my humiliation were a sad little decoration added to the wedding. My father made it worse without even raising his voice. I passed near him while carrying a tray of water glasses, and one of his guests asked if I was family. Robert Harper looked at me for half a second, then chuckled. "Evelyn? She's just helping out. At least she's useful today." The men laughed politely. I kept walking. Every step became harder, but my face stayed calm. That was the one thing my family had never understood about me. They thought silence meant surrender. They never realized silence could also be storage. I stored every insult, every glance, every whisper. I noticed who Linda greeted warmly and who she avoided. I noticed my mother watching the groom's family with hungry admiration. I noticed my father performing pride he had not earned, and I noticed Daniel Cole. At first, only from a distance. He stood near the front of the ballroom with two groomsmen, tall, composed, and dressed in a black suit that fit like it had been made for him. He smiled when people approached, shook hands, accepted congratulations, but something about him seemed strained. His eyes moved too often toward Linda, then toward a tall man in a dark designer suit standing near the bar. The movement was brief, but I caught it. By late afternoon, the ceremony was close, and the hotel staff began rushing last-minute items between the ballroom and the private suites. A senior server handed me a silver tray with a glass bottle of water and 2 crystal glasses. "Groom's suite," she said. "End of the east hallway. They asked for this." I took the tray without argument and made my way through the quieter part of the hotel. The noise of the ballroom faded behind me, replaced by the softer sounds of distant music and footsteps on carpet. I knocked once on the suite door, but it was already slightly open. "Come in," a man's voice called. I stepped inside. Daniel stood near the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. He turned with the polite, distracted expression people give to hotel staff. For half a second, his eyes passed over the uniform, the tray, the apron. Then they lifted to my face. Something changed. His hand stilled at his cuff. The color in his face faded just enough for me to see it. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but recognition. The room seemed to hold its breath around us. I set the tray carefully on the side table. "Your water," I said. Daniel did not look at the tray. He was still looking at me, as if the woman standing in front of him did. He began, then stopped. I waited. His voice lowered. "You're Linda's sister, aren't you?" I met his eyes and gave him the only answer he needed. "Yes," I said. "I am." Daniel Cole did not answer right away. He stood near the mirror in his black wedding suit, one hand still frozen at his cufflink, but his attention was no longer on the ceremony or the people waiting downstairs. It was on me. More precisely, on the contradiction in front of him, Linda Harper's older sister, dressed in a server's uniform, carrying water into his suite like hotel staff. I placed the tray on the side table. "The staff said you requested water." He glanced at the bottle, then back at my face. "Thank you," he said, though his voice had lost its ease. I gave a polite nod and turned toward the door, but he spoke before I could leave. "Wait. I'm sorry, have we met before?" "No," I said. "I don't believe we have." His eyes narrowed slightly. Not with suspicion, but with recognition trying to become certainty. Then he said the name that changed the air between us. Grand Muse Events. I kept my expression still. I had learned a long time ago that people reveal more when you do not rush to help them. Daniel took a slow breath. "You're Evelyn Harper, founder of Grand Muse. I saw the Forbes feature last spring. Fastest growing luxury event company on the East Coast. You built it from nothing. You have a good memory," I said. His gaze dropped to my apron. This time, when he looked back at me, there was no polite confusion left. "Why are you dressed like this?" "My family needed help." "That is not what I meant." "I know," I said, "but it is the answer they would give." For the first time that day, someone looked uncomfortable on my behalf. Daniel glanced toward the door, as if the entire Harper family had suddenly become something he needed to re-examine. I could almost see him connecting the pieces. Linda's perfect smile, my mother's polished pride, my father's quiet arrogance, and me standing in a uniform they had clearly chosen for me. "I've been trying to get a meeting with Grand Muse for months," he said. "I know." That startled him. "You know, my office receives many proposals." Embarrassment crossed his face. He stick plowin'. The family Heatons had dressed as a maid, the very woman he had been trying to impress. I could have made the moment cruel. I could have explained how my mother had stripped me of my place at the table. Instead, I said nothing more. Silence had carried me this far. I trusted it. Daniel lowered his voice. "Did Linda know who you are?" A faint smile touched my mouth. "Linda knows what benefits her." He had no answer for that. The room was quiet except for distant music from the ballroom. Finally, he said, "Miss Harper, I'm sorry." The apology was small, but it was the first honest thing I had heard all day. "Enjoy your wedding, Mr. Cole," I replied. When I left the suite, Daniel was still standing by the mirror, but he no longer looked like a man preparing for the happiest day of his life. By the time I returned to the ballroom, the ceremony had ended, and the reception had begun. The room glittered with chandeliers, white roses, crystal glasses, and the kind of laughter people use when they want to sound important. At the head table, Linda sat in the center like a queen accepting worship. My mother leaned toward a group of guests, glowing with pride as she praised Linda's career in public relations. "Our Linda has always known how to belong in the right rooms," Margaret said. I stood behind her with a tray in my hands. Belong in the right rooms, the phrase almost made me laugh. Linda smiled modestly, but I knew that smile. It was the one she used when she wanted people to mistake performance for grace. "In my work, relationships are everything," she said. "People trust you when they know you understand their world." My father nodded as if Linda's success proved his own importance. When one guest noticed me and asked if I was family, Robert barely looked in my direction. "Evelyn is helping out tonight," he said. "She has always been good behind the scenes." A few people smiled politely. No one questioned it. I moved along the head table with a tray of wine. I served my mother first. She took the glass without thanking me. I served my father next. He continued speaking as if my hand had appeared from nowhere. Linda accepted her glass while looking past me, her smile still aimed at the room. Then I reached Daniel. He had been quiet since returning from the suite. Now, with me standing beside him in that uniform, his composure thinned. His eyes met mine, and I saw the weight of what he knew, pressing against what everyone else still believed. I lifted a glass of red wine from the tray. For 1 second, he did not move. Then he reached for it. His hand trembled. The stem slipped. Wine splashed across my sleeve and spread dark over the white cuff before dripping onto the tablecloth. A sharp gasp rose from the table. Linda jerked back. My mother's smile vanished. My father stopped mid-sentence. I steadied the tray and caught the glass before it shattered, but the room had already begun to turn toward us. Daniel stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face had gone pale. "I'm sorry," he said, voice strained. Then, before he could stop himself, one word slipped out. "Boss." The sound cut through the ballroom. At first, no one moved. My mother stared at him as if she had misheard. Linda's eyes sharpened. My father's face tightened with confusion. Around us, conversations died one by one. "What did you just call her?" Linda asked. Daniel looked trapped. I misspoke. "No," Linda said, quieter now. "You called her boss." The whispers began almost immediately. "Did he say boss? To the server? Isn't that the bride's sister?" For the first time all day, the room was not looking through me. It was looking at me. My mother's eyes moved from Daniel to my stained sleeve, then to my face, searching for an explanation she was not ready to hear. I took a folded napkin from the table and pressed it calmly against the wine stain. I could have told them everything. I could have said my name, my title, my company, and watched the truth humiliate them in the same room where they had tried to erase me. But that would have been too easy and too soon. So I lowered my head slightly and said, "Excuse me, I'll get another glass." Then I turned and walked away. I did not hurry. I let the silence follow me across the ballroom. I let the guests whisper. I let my mother wonder why her future son-in-law had called the daughter she dressed as a maid his boss. Near the service corridor, I looked down at the red stain spreading across my sleeve. The color pulled an old memory from the place where I had buried it for 20 years. I was 18 again. My father was holding a bank statement. My mother was crying like I had destroyed the family. Linda was standing behind them with innocent eyes and a lie ready on her tongue. That was the night they called me a thief. That was the night they threw me out. And now, because Daniel had said one word, the past was coming back. I stood in the service corridor, with a napkin pressed against my sleeve, watching the red wine sink deeper into the white fabric. For everyone else, it was just a stain. For me, it looked too much like the past bleeding through. I was 18, the first time my family truly erased me. That night began with my father shouting my name from downstairs. I remember the sound of it clearly, sharp and angry, not like a father calling his daughter, but like a judge calling a criminal forward. I had been in my room, filling out college forms, believing foolishly that if I worked hard enough, maybe I could leave that house with their blessing instead of their resentment. When I came downstairs, my father was standing in the living room with a bank statement in his hand. My mother sat on the sofa, pale and trembling. Linda stood near the hallway behind them, her eyes wide, her lips parted as if she had been crying. $10,000, my father said, shaking the paper at me. Gone. I stared at him, confused. What are you talking about? He threw the statement onto the coffee table. Beside it was a withdrawal slip with a signature at the bottom. My name. Or close enough to my name that anyone who wanted to believe it would not look twice. I picked up the paper with cold fingers. The handwriting looked familiar, but not mine. The shape of the E was too dramatic. The line through the H was too sharp. I knew immediately who had copied it. Linda. I looked at her, but she lowered her eyes before mine could hold her. I didn't do this, I said. My mother made a wounded sound. Evelyn, don't make this worse. I'm not lying. My father stepped closer. Your name is on the withdrawal. That money was for Linda's tuition program in Paris. Do you understand what you've done? The words landed in the room before I could breathe. Linda's Paris program, of course. The internship she had cried about for weeks, because my parents said they could not afford it. The program that would change her future, as my mother kept saying. I didn't take it, I said, louder this time. Check the bank cameras, call someone. Ask Linda where she was. Linda's head snapped up. Tears filled her eyes so quickly it almost impressed me. Why would you say that? She whispered. I tried to defend you. That was the moment I understood the lie had already been built before I entered the room. Linda had not simply taken the money. She had prepared the performance. My father turned toward her, and his face softened in a way it never softened for me. You don't have to protect her. Linda wiped her cheek. I saw her with the checkbook last week. I didn't want to say anything because I thought maybe I was wrong. I stared at her. My own sister looked back at me with wet eyes and a trembling mouth, and behind all that innocence, I saw victory. You're lying, I said. My mother stood so quickly the bracelets on her wrist clattered. Enough. Linda has no reason to lie. And I do? My father's answer came without hesitation. You've always been jealous of her. There it was. The truth my parents had been waiting to say for years. Not that I was guilty because there was proof, but because guilt fit the story they already believed about me. Linda was the daughter with a future. I was the bitter one standing too close to it. I begged them to call the bank. I begged them to compare the signature. I begged them to think, just once, before choosing her over me. But my begging only made me look smaller. Finally, my father pointed toward the stairs. Pack a bag. My mother turned away from me. I can't look at you right now. Linda said nothing. That silence was the cruelest part. I left that house with one duffel bag, $83, and my mother's final words following me down the front steps. You have shamed this family. The door closed before I reached the sidewalk. For the first few nights, I slept wherever I could. A bus station, a shelter. Once, the back booth of a diner where a waitress felt sorry enough to let me stay until sunrise. I washed dishes for cash, cleaned offices after midnight, answered phones at a repair shop, and took every small job that did not ask too many questions. Survival did not feel heroic. It felt cold. It felt like cracked hands from dish soap, cheap bread for dinner, and pretending not to cry in public bathrooms because there was nowhere private to break down. But slowly, something changed. Every job taught me something. In restaurants, I learned timing. In offices, I learned how people with power spoke to those without it. As an assistant for a small event planner, I learned that beautiful rooms were not magic. They were logistics, pressure, taste, and control. At night, I sat in public libraries and read everything I could about business, negotiation, hospitality, design, and branding. I did not have college the way Linda did. I had exhaustion, secondhand books, and the kind of focus that comes from having no safety net. My first real event was a private dinner for a restaurant owner who almost canceled because his planner quit 2 days before the party. I told him I could fix it. I borrowed linens, found discounted flowers, rewrote the seating plan, and stayed awake for 36 hours, making sure nothing failed. The guests loved it. One of them asked for my card. I did not have one, so I wrote my number on the back of a receipt. That receipt became 3 more jobs. 3 jobs became 10. 10 became Grand Muse Events. I built the company slowly at first, from a rented desk in a shared office and a phone that never stopped ringing. I did the contracts, the vendor calls, the floor plans, the budgets, and when something went wrong, I carried the crates myself. Eventually, clients stopped asking if I had experience and started asking if I had availability. Years later, Grand Muse was planning brand launches, charity galas, private fashion dinners, and weddings so expensive that my mother would have pretended not to be impressed while secretly memorizing every detail. My staff called me demanding, fair, and impossible to fool. The industry called me disciplined. A Forbes profile called me self-made. My family called me nothing, because they did not know, and I let it stay that way. Once, Linda's PR firm sent a proposal to Grand Muse, hoping to partner on a luxury fashion campaign. Her name was on the email. I remember sitting in my office, reading her polished language about trust, image, and elite relationships. She had no idea she was asking for approval from the sister she had framed and discarded. I could have replied myself. I could have ended her confidence with 1 sentence. Instead, I asked my assistant to decline politely. Grand Muse would be moving forward with another partner. That was enough. I did not need revenge then. I had my company, my name, and a life she could not take. But standing in that service corridor years later, wearing the uniform my mother had chosen for me, I understood something important. Linda had not changed. She had only improved her costume. The girl who forged my name had become a woman who built her career on charm and hidden damage. My parents still applauded the performance because admitting the truth would mean admitting what they had done to me. I removed the napkin from my sleeve. The stain had spread, but I no longer cared. From inside the ballroom, I could still hear the murmurs Daniel's word had created. Boss. One word had opened a door my family had spent 20 years holding shut. I was about to return to the reception when I heard footsteps behind me. Evelyn. I turned. Daniel stood at the end of the corridor, his face pale, his wedding smile gone completely. He looked over his shoulder once, then walked toward me with the urgency of a man who had finally stopped pretending. There's something you need to know about Linda, he said, and from the look in his eye, I knew the night was about to get much worse for my sister. Daniel stopped a few feet away from me in the service corridor, breathing like a man who had run from something he could no longer pretend not to see. Behind him, the ballroom still glowed with music, laughter, and the kind of polished happiness people expected at an expensive wedding. Out here, under the colder hallway lights, his face looked stripped of all ceremony. There's something you need to know about Linda, he said. I studied him carefully. Then say it. He looked over his shoulder once before lowering his voice. Before the engagement party, I hired someone to look into her. That should have surprised me. It didn't. Men like Daniel Cole did not build companies, inherit wealth, or move through elite circles by trusting every smile placed in front of them. If he had doubts, he would have investigated them quietly. Why? I asked. Because things didn't add up, he said. Her stories changed. Her connections appeared too convenient. She talked about loyalty, but she guarded her phone like it could destroy her. His jaw tightened. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. And were you? He let out a bitter laugh. No. For a moment, Daniel seemed to struggle with the shame of saying it out loud. Then his voice dropped flatter, colder. Linda has been seeing someone else, a fashion CEO. He's here tonight." I did not move, but my mind immediately returned to the man I had noticed near the bar earlier, the one Daniel had kept glancing toward. Tall, dark suit, expensive watch, too comfortable in a room where everyone else was performing. Linda had smiled at him once during cocktail hour, just briefly, but the smile had been different from the one she gave the guests. Softer, sharper, familiar. "How certain are you?" I asked. "Certain enough." Daniel pulled out his phone, opened a folder, and showed me a few images. Linda stepping out of a black car. Linda entering a hotel lobby beside the same man. A screenshot of messages that were not romantic enough to be careless, but intimate enough to be damning. The investigator found meetings, hotel records, photos. I was going to confront her after the wedding. "After?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like a man trying to protect his reputation before his heart." He looked away, and I knew I had hit the truth. "Maybe I was," he admitted. "The Cole family has a name. Calling off a wedding this size without proof would have turned me into the villain by morning. Linda knows how to control a story." "Yes," I said. "She does." Daniel looked back at me then. "That's why I came to you. When I saw you in that uniform, when I realized who you were, I understood something was wrong with this family. You're the only person here who seems to know what Linda is capable of." I almost smiled at that, but there was nothing funny about it. 20 years ago, I had tried to tell my parents what Linda was capable of. They had thrown me out instead. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I don't know," Daniel said. His voice sounded tired now. "Maybe nothing. Maybe I just needed one person in this building to know I'm not imagining it." "You're not imagining it." The answer was quiet, but it settled between us with weight. Daniel nodded once, as if that was all he needed. He did not ask me to save him. I did not offer. He had his proof, his doubts, and his pride. What he did with them would be his choice. Mine was already forming. When I returned to the ballroom, I was still wearing the server's uniform. For the first time that day, it did not feel only like humiliation. It felt like cover. People ignored staff until they needed something. They spoke freely around trays, aprons, and lowered eyes. My mother had dressed me to disappear, and now that invisibility would give me access to every corner of the room. I moved slowly along the tables, collecting empty glasses and listening. The whispers about Daniel calling me boss had not stopped, but my family was doing its best to smother them under forced smiles. My mother laughed too loudly. My father drank too quickly. Linda kept one hand on Daniel's arm whenever guests looked her way, playing the devoted bride with practiced ease. Then, she slipped away. I saw her leave the head table during a toast, moving toward the side of the ballroom, where marble pillars cast long shadows against the wall. The fashion CEO followed less than a minute later, pretending to answer a phone call. No one else seemed to notice. That was Linda's gift. She made dishonesty look like timing. I picked up a tray and crossed the room. They stood near a service alcove, partly hidden from the guests, but not from someone carrying champagne. Linda's back was angled toward me, her veil falling over one shoulder. The man leaned close, his hand brushing her wrist, in a way no business partner should touch a bride on her wedding night. "You're getting nervous," he murmured. Linda gave a soft laugh. "I'm getting married. I'm allowed. After tonight, things change. After tonight, I'll have access to Daniel's circle," she said. "That's the point." I lowered my eyes and pretended to adjust the glasses on my tray. My phone was tucked beneath the folded service cloth, camera angled just enough. I tapped the screen once. The recording began. The CEO reached into his jacket and passed Linda a small envelope. She took it quickly, but not quickly enough. My phone caught the exchange. "The Milan contacts are inside," he said, "but you need to clean up the old invoices. If anyone checks your firm's books—" "No one will," Linda interrupted. I handled the employee who was asking questions. The words hit me harder than I expected. An employee. A fall guy. Another person sacrificed so Linda could keep shining. The CEO's voice dropped lower. You said the same thing about your sister once. Linda went still for half a second, then laughed. Evelyn, please, she was easy. My parents wanted to believe the worst of her. I just gave them a reason. My hand tightened around the tray. For 20 years, I had known the truth. Hearing Linda say it out loud did not heal anything. It only sharpened the wound into something usable. I moved away before they could notice me, my face calm, my phone still recording beneath the cloth. Near the kitchen entrance, I checked the footage. Linda's face was visible. The envelope was visible. Her words were clear enough. Easy. She was easy. I saved the file twice. Then I stepped into a quiet hallway and called a number I had kept for years but never used. His name was Marcus Reed, a former junior associate at Linda's PR firm. He had once sent Grand Muse a cautious message after Linda tried to partner with us, warning my office to be careful. I remembered his name because the fear in that message had felt familiar. He answered on the third ring. "Who is this?" "Evelyn Harper," I said. "Grand Muse Events." There was a pause. "Why are you calling me?" "Because I think Linda Harper ruined more lives than mine." Silence followed. Then his voice changed. "What did she do?" "She just admitted she framed me years ago. I also have reason to believe she used company money illegally and blamed someone else." Marcus gave a short, bitter laugh. "That someone was me." I closed my eyes briefly. He continued, faster now, as if a door had opened, and years of silence were rushing out. She moved client funds through fake vendor invoices. When I questioned it, she made it look like I had approved the payments. I lost my job, almost lost my license. I kept copies of everything because I knew one day she'd do it to the wrong person. "Send them to me." "You're going after her?" "No," I said. "I'm letting the truth catch up." Marcus did not ask anything else. Within minutes, files appeared in my inbox, emails, invoices, transfer records, internal messages with Linda's instructions hidden behind careful language. It was not just an affair anymore. It was fraud, manipulation, and a pattern of destroying anyone who stood too close to her secrets. I forwarded the files to a secure folder my assistant could access and sent one short message. "Verify these, quietly, urgent." Her reply came 2 minutes later. "On it." When I returned to the ballroom, the energy had shifted. Guests were seated again. The staff was preparing the next part of the evening. On the far wall, a massive screen began to glow as technicians tested the slideshow Linda had arranged, no doubt filled with childhood photos, engagement pictures, and carefully chosen memories designed to make the Harper family look blessed. I looked at the screen, then at Linda. She was back beside Daniel, smiling again, one hand resting over his as if nothing in the world could touch her. My mother watched them with pride. My father lifted his glass. They all believed the performance was still theirs. But now I had Daniel's proof: Linda's confession, the recording, the envelope exchange, and Marcus's documents. I had not invented a single lie. I had only collected the truth they had left scattered around the room because they thought no one like me could use it. The lights began to dim. A soft voice announced that the family slideshow was about to begin. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, still in the uniform my mother had chosen, and watched Linda turn toward the screen with a bride's perfect smile. She had spent her whole life controlling the story. Tonight, the story was about to answer back. The lights dimmed, and the ballroom softened into a golden hush. Conversations faded as guests turned toward the large screen at the front of the room. Linda sat straighter in her chair, smoothing one hand over her wedding gown, her face arranged into the perfect expression of humble surprise. My mother dabbed at her eyes before anything had even begun, already preparing to look moved for the people watching her. My father lifted his chin with quiet pride, as if the evening were proof that every choice he had made had led the Harper family to this shining moment. The first images appeared exactly as expected. Linda as a child in a white dress, holding flowers bigger than her hands. Linda at a school recital, smiling beneath stage lights. Linda at graduation, standing between my parents while I was nowhere in the frame. The guests smiled politely. Some laughed at the childhood photos. My mother leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something that made them both look at Linda with admiration. I stood near the service entrance with an empty tray in my hands. The uniform still scratched at my collar. The wine stain had dried dark on my sleeve. To anyone glancing my way, I was still part of the staff. That was fine. From the edge of the room, I could see everything. The slideshow moved into Linda's adult life. Rooftop parties, fashion events, charity dinners, glossy photographs of her with clients and executives. Each image seemed designed to say the same thing. Linda belonged in important rooms. Linda had earned her place. Linda was the daughter worth celebrating. Then the screen flickered. At first, people thought it was a technical mistake. A few guests shifted in their seats. One of the hotel technicians frowned and leaned toward his console. Linda's smile twitched, but she kept it in place. The next image was not from the approved slideshow. It was a video. Linda stood beside a black car outside a hotel entrance. Her wedding soft smile replaced by something sharper and more private. The man beside her was the fashion CEO from the ballroom, the one Daniel had named in the corridor. On the screen, he reached for her waist, and she did not pull away. She laughed, leaned close, and kissed him. A low sound moved through the room, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper. It spread from table to table as the guests began to understand what they were seeing. Linda shot to her feet. "Turn that off." No one moved fast enough. The video continued. Now she and the same man were standing near the marble pillars of the ballroom only moments earlier. The angle was discreet but clear. His hand brushed her wrist. She accepted the envelope. His voice, captured cleanly enough to be heard, came through the speakers. "The Milan contacts are inside, but you need to clean up the old invoices." Linda's recorded voice answered, smooth and careless. "No one will check. I handled the employee who was asking questions." The room changed completely. The romance drained out of it. Crystal, flowers, candlelight, silk gowns, and champagne suddenly looked like decorations in a courtroom. My mother stood so quickly, her chair struck the one behind her. "Stop this right now," she snapped, her voice cracking beneath the command. "This is inappropriate. Turn it off." The technician looked panicked. "Ma'am, I'm trying." The screen kept playing. The next clip made Daniel go still. Linda's voice came through again, softer this time, but unmistakable. "Evelyn was easy. My parents wanted to believe the worst of her. I just gave them a reason." A silence fell so hard it felt physical. My mother turned toward me before she could stop herself. My father did too. For the first time that night, they looked at me not as a problem to hide, not as a servant, not as a useful pair of hands, but as someone standing beside a truth they had spent 20 years refusing to face. Linda screamed, "That's fake." But her voice had already lost the room. The screen shifted from video to documents. Emails appeared, vendor invoices, bank transfers, internal messages marked with Linda's name. The evidence moved too quickly for every guest to read in full, but they did not need every detail. They saw enough. They saw the pattern. They saw that the perfect bride had not only been unfaithful, she had been stealing, hiding, blaming, and building her image on other people's ruin. A man near the front table muttered, "My God." Someone else said, "That's her company account." Another guest lifted a phone and started recording. Then another. Within seconds, small screens glowed across the ballroom like scattered sparks. Linda turned toward Daniel, her face pale beneath her makeup. "Daniel, listen to me. This is a setup. Someone is trying to ruin me." Daniel did not answer. She stepped closer to him, reaching for his arm. "You know me." He looked at her hand until she pulled it back. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think I do." My mother moved toward him, desperate now. "Daniel, please. This is clearly some kind of malicious attack. Weddings attract jealousy. People fabricate things. We can handle this privately." Daniel finally looked at her, and whatever remained of the polite groom disappeared from his face. "Privately?" he repeated. "Your daughter was cheating on me with a guest in this room. She was hiding financial fraud, and she just admitted she framed her own sister. My father stood, his voice low and urgent. "Careful, Daniel. You're emotional. Don't say something you can't take back." Daniel gave a bitter laugh. "That is the first honest warning I've heard from this family." Linda began crying then, but even her tears seemed late. She had cried as a child to get new dresses, cried as a teenager to escape blame, cried as an adult to make powerful men soften. Tonight, the tears landed in a room that had already seen behind them. "Daniel," she said, her voice breaking, "I made mistakes. I was scared. You have to understand the pressure I was under." "The pressure to marry me while sleeping with another man?" he asked. "The pressure to steal from your company? Or the pressure to destroy Evelyn so you could go to Paris with money you let your parents believe she stole?" The name Paris struck my mother like a slap. Her lips parted. My father's face turned gray. They knew that word. They knew that program. They knew the money. For 20 years, they had protected themselves from doubt by refusing to ask the right questions. Now the questions stood in front of them, dressed in a server's uniform, holding a tray. Linda shook her head wildly. "I was 18. I didn't know what I was doing." I almost smiled at that. At 18, I had been old enough to be thrown into the street. Linda, apparently, had still been young enough to be excused. Daniel turned away from her and faced the room. His voice carried clearly, without shouting. "This wedding is over." The words cut the last thread holding the evening together. Linda made a sound that was almost a sob and almost a scream. My mother grabbed the back of her chair as if her body had forgotten how to stand. My father looked around the ballroom, not at his daughter, not at me, but at the guests. Even now, he was measuring the damage by the number of witnesses. Daniel continued, his eyes moving briefly to me. "And if there is anyone here who deserves respect tonight, it is not the woman in the wedding gown. It is the woman this family tried to dress as a servant." Every head turned. I felt the room land on me. Daniel's voice remained steady. "Evelyn Harper has shown more dignity in silence than this family has shown in all its performance. They put her behind the scenes because they were ashamed of the wrong daughter." My mother whispered my name, but it did not sound like an apology. It sounded like fear. Linda collapsed back into her chair, her hands shaking against the white fabric of her gown. The dress that had made her look untouchable now made her look trapped. The fashion CEO had vanished from his table. Several guests were already leaving. Others stayed because scandal has a gravity people like to pretend they are above. Daniel removed his wedding ring before the ceremony had made it permanent and placed it on the table in front of Linda. "I will not marry a lie," he said. Then he walked out. No dramatic pause, no final glance at Linda, no plea for understanding. He simply turned his back on the wedding my family had spent months building and left the ballroom through the main doors. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room broke apart. Guests stood, whispered, recorded, gathered their bags, called drivers, and stared openly at the Harper family. My mother tried to speak to people as they passed, but no one wanted to be seen comforting her. My father sat down slowly, his face empty. Linda remained at the head table, crying into her hands, while the screen behind her had gone black. I looked at the tray in my hands. All evening, it had marked my place. Serve, clear, smile, disappear. I walked to the nearest table and set it down. The sound was soft, but to me it felt final. Then I untied the apron from my waist, folded it once, and placed it beside the tray. Across the room, my mother saw me do it. So did my father. So did Linda. No one stopped me. I walked toward the service corridor with my stained sleeve, my steady hands, and every eye following me now for a different reason. Behind me, the wedding continued to collapse under the weight of its own truth. For the first time that day, I was not carrying anything for them. And by morning, the whole world would know why. By morning, my sister's wedding was no longer a private disaster. It belonged to the internet. The first video appeared before sunrise, filmed from a guest's phone near the head table. It showed Linda standing in her wedding gown, screaming that the footage was fake, while the screen behind her played evidence no one could ignore. Another clip showed Daniel removing his ring and saying, "I will not marry a lie." But the one that spread fastest was shorter, sharper, and crueler. It showed me standing in a server's uniform, while Daniel called me boss, then the room going silent around us. By noon, the hashtags were everywhere. Number boss at the wedding. Number $1 million meltdown. Number Harper wedding scandal. Society pages picked it up first, then business blogs, then the morning shows that loved turning rich people's shame into entertainment. Commentators replayed the footage of Linda with the fashion CEO, freezing the frame where she accepted the envelope. Others focused on the audio of her admitting she had framed me years ago. Her face, once polished for magazines and PR panels, became the image attached to every headline about betrayal, fraud, and a wedding that collapsed before dessert. Linda tried to fight the story, of course. That was what she did for a living. Her firm released a statement calling the videos maliciously edited and deeply misleading. Within hours, Marcus Reed posted the documents he had sent me, along with his own account of how Linda had used fake vendor invoices and blamed him when he asked questions. Former employees started replying. One said Linda had ruined her career. Another said clients had been overcharged for years. A third wrote only, "I wondered when the truth would finally come out." After that, the story changed. It was no longer just about a cheating bride. It was about a pattern. The brands Linda had worked so hard to impress ran from her faster than guests had run from the ballroom. A cosmetics company terminated its contract. A fashion house suspended its campaign. 2 clients announced audits. By the end of the week, Harper PR's office was locked, its website replaced by a vague notice about temporary operational review. Everyone knew what that meant. Linda's empire had not been destroyed by gossip. It had been destroyed by receipts. My parents disappeared from public view for 3 days. Then they came to me. They arrived at my Manhattan office on a gray afternoon, not at my apartment, which told me everything. They did not come as parents. They came as people who had finally learned where power was located. My assistant called first, her voice carefully neutral. "There are 2 people here asking for you, Margaret and Robert Harper." I looked through the glass wall of my office and saw them standing in the reception area. My mother wore dark glasses, though we were indoors. My father looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders curved inward, his hands clasped in front of him like a man waiting outside a courtroom. "Send them in," I said. They entered slowly, looking around my office with the stunned discomfort of people forced to admit they had underestimated the wrong person. Behind me, framed photographs lined the wall. Galas, launches, private dinners, charity events, rooms I had built from pressure and precision. In every image, powerful people smiled beneath lighting my company had designed. My mother stared at them, as if each photograph were an accusation. "Evelyn," she began. I waited. She swallowed. "We need your help. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Help." My father stepped forward. "This has gone too far. Linda's company is collapsing. Reporters are outside the house. People are calling us, asking questions about things from 20 years ago." "Good," I said. My mother flinched. "Good?" "Yes. Questions should have been asked 20 years ago." Her mouth trembled, but I did not soften. I remembered being 18, standing on the porch with one bag while the door closed behind me. I remembered sleeping in a bus station. I remembered washing dishes until my fingers cracked. They had not come looking for me then. They had not wondered whether they might have been wrong. "We made mistakes," my father said. "You made choices." He looked down. My mother removed her glasses. Her eyes were red, but I could not tell whether the tears were for me, for Linda, or for the family name now rotting in public. "Please," she said, "don't release anything else. Don't speak to the press. Don't make this worse." I leaned back in my chair. "You begged for silence. I begged for the truth. You gave me neither." Neither of them answered. "That night," I continued, "I asked you to call the bank. I asked you to check the signature. I asked you to look at Linda, instead of deciding I was guilty because it was easier. You threw me out with less evidence than the internet has now." My father's face tightened with shame. But shame after consequence is not the same as remorse. "We were trying to protect the family," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You were trying to protect the daughter who made you look good." My mother began to cry then, but the sound did not move me the way it once might have. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel rage or satisfaction or some enormous release. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The people sitting across from me had once held my whole world in their hands. Now they looked like strangers who had lost the right to ask for shelter. "I'm not going to lie for you," I said. "I'm not going to hide Linda's choices, and I'm not going to protect a family name that never protected me." My mother whispered, "We're still your family." I looked at her for a long moment. "No, you are the people I survived." They left without another word. That evening, I wrote one post. I did not mention every detail. I did not insult Linda. I did not beg for sympathy. I simply told the truth. That at 18, I was accused of stealing money I never touched. That I was thrown out without proof. That I rebuilt my life from kitchens, libraries, and borrowed chances. And that no title, no company, no public recognition had ever meant as much as finally saying, "Clearly, I did not do it." The post spread faster than I expected. Employees, clients, and strangers shared it. Women wrote about being the overlooked daughter. Former service workers wrote about being invisible in rooms they held together. Business magazines that had once profiled Grand Muse now requested interviews about resilience, leadership, and reputation. Forbes published a follow-up piece with a headline I almost laughed at when I saw it. "The woman they made a maid was the one who built the room." For the first time, the world knew the part of my story my family had tried to bury. Linda reached out 2 weeks later. Not with an apology. Not really. Her email was polished, brief, and desperate beneath the surface. She wrote that we had both been hurt, that the media had twisted things, that perhaps Grand Muse and Harper PR could find a path toward mutual restoration. She offered to help rebuild my public narrative, as if I needed her to polish the truth she had spent her life hiding. I read it once, then forwarded it to my assistant. "Please decline." My assistant replied with a draft 10 minutes later. It was perfect. "Miss Harper, thank you for reaching out. Grand Muse Events does not require your services. We wish you clarity moving forward." I approved it without changing a word. Months passed. The scandal faded from headlines, as scandals always do, but the consequences remained. Linda faced lawsuits, audits, and a reputation no PR strategy could repair. Daniel returned to his own life and, through his office, sent one formal apology for the humiliation I had endured at the wedding. I accepted it politely. He had triggered the truth, but he had not saved me. I had stopped needing rescue a long time ago. As for my parents, they called twice. I did not answer. Then they stopped. On a winter evening nearly a year later, I stood in the ballroom of a charity gala Grand Muse had designed from the ground up. The room glowed with soft gold light. White flowers climbed the columns. Crystal glasses waited at every place setting. For a moment, it reminded me of Linda's wedding, but the feeling did not hurt the way I expected it to. This room was mine. My team moved around me with calm precision, adjusting final details before the guests arrived. A young coordinator hurried over with a tablet in her hands. "Boss," she said, "the donor table is ready for your approval." I turned toward her. The word did not shock anyone this time. No one gasped. No one whispered. No one wondered why I was there. I was exactly where I belonged. I looked across the ballroom, at the tables, the lights, the people who trusted me, and I finally understood something I had spent most of my life trying to learn. Freedom was not being invited back into my family's good graces. It was not Linda's downfall. or my parents' regret, or the world finally knowing my name. Freedom was standing in a room I had built and realizing I no longer wanted a seat at their table. For the first time in my life, I did not need the Harper family to see me. I could see myself.